Hey, it's Banana. Before we dive into this episode, I want to mention some content warnings. This episode specifically contains graphic depictions of violence and suicide, which may be intense for some listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey y'all, it's Brutal Dan.
And it's Banana Chan. Welcome to the Spooky Asian Club.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Spooky Asian Club is your new favorite horror podcast where we slice into the intersections of Asian stories, horror movies, pop culture, and more from our creepy little perspectives.
And in this episode, we're talking about the 2001 Japanese film Versus. But before we get into that, let's introduce our guest for this episode.
Hey everyone, I'm Daniel. I'm Daniel Kwan. I'm a podcaster. I co-host the Asians Represent podcast, and just recently launched a new podcast called John Who, the ultimate podcast for fans of doves, hyperviolent gunfights, and heartfelt romances.
Oh my gosh, this is, I understand why you picked this movie now. And we won't jump into the meat and potatoes just yet, but everything is tracking. So Daniel, what spooked you lately?
I've been thinking about this because
Yeah.
you folks messaged me about like what spooked me, and I've been trying to think about like when's the last time I've been like super scared or like creeped out. And I settled on two things. So one was like a time that I was creeped out at work, and another time was when I was creeped out while traveling.
Two scary things.
Oh.
Too
Like,
sca- I think they were like unsettling. I think
yeah,
they're more
unsettling.
unsettling than anything. The first one was, so I used to work at like a museum here in Toronto, and it's built upon old farmland. It was said that the museum was haunted. I was in high school when this happened, and I used to run um, the theater in the museum for like kids programs in the mornings, and I was like and like running in like the booth. We had like the films and everything. I was the booth guy, and I remember very vividly it being like 7:30 a.m. I was sitting in the booth, and I look out into the theater, and this is one of those like old school theaters with like the plush seats and everything. And I see like a little girl sitting within like the front rows, wearing like this like old school sort of like nightgown type dress. And I look at it and be like, oh, somebody's here. I'm gonna go put on a movie. And I go and I like get a movie going. I'm like, oh, they let the kids in early. I put on a movie. I look back out and she's gone. And that was like super unsettling for me at the time. And like I'm not the type of person who necessarily believes in like ghosts per se. I know that there are things out there that we can't explain.
Mhm.
But yeah, that was like the first time I've ever been like, I don't know how to rationalize this.
What movie did you try to put on? Do you remember?
Oh, they were like Canadian National Film Board movies. If you're Canadian, you
So
understand.
you just bored this little Victorian girl away.
Yeah, probably, probably. It was I remember like it would have been something like The Sweater, which is like a classic Canadian animated movie about a hockey player named Maurice Richard, something like that. The other time was when I was living in China. I was in Shanghai, and I really wanted to like do something different. And I actually searched up well, like what is one of the most haunted places in Shanghai? And there is a an apartment building. It used to be called the Normandy Apartments, and now I think it's called like the Wukang Mansion. And it's in like metropolitan, like downtown Shanghai. And it was really famous during the Cultural Revolution because a lot of intellectuals and artists lived in this apartment. And when there was a lot of heavy persecution against them, um, they would commit suicide off of the building. And the building was famously called the diving board. So I went to visit this building because I was learning about the Cultural Revolution and stuff like that. And I managed to get into the apartment, and it is still like an apartment where people live. And it was like very weird being a foreigner of like the Asian diaspora and visiting this apartment. And I guess the time that I went, it was like there's like nobody around, and the wind would like travel through the hallways, and it sounds like you can hear people like talking and whispering to you. So like given like the context behind all of the deaths surrounding that apartment, it was like really, really like chilling and interesting at the same time. I also shouldn't have been there too, so there was kind of the thrill of being like, I'm trespassing.
Do you think there was anything that the wind was telling you? Like, did you hear anything that was audibly like a sentence?
Maybe it was in Chinese, but my Chinese is not very good, so I don't know.
I mean, first off, very dark that this place is nicknamed the diving board. Like it took me a minute to get it, and I was like, oh.
Oh, yeah.
Secondly, did you like when you were there, like what was like the feeling you got? Was there any like malice in there, or was it just unsettling, or was it kind of I
I
don't know,
think if
did
I
you
were to
feel
like
anything?
ascribe like a vibe, it would be like fear and like loathing, right? Because these are people
Mm.
who the government and people trying to essentially turned against, right? During the Cultural Revolution.
Going quickly back to the little Victorian girl in the movie
Yeah.
theater. Sorry, I'm so curious. Like, okay, so I have two questions. The first question is, are you
I have a
sure?
theory about who she is.
Do you think that she was she just like a little girl in cosplay?
No, no, definitely not. 100% not. We wouldn't have even allowed kids into the
Oh
museum
my
at that
God.
time. It wasn't possible for a kid to be there that early.
Wait, so who do you
Um,
think it was?
so I don't think it was like a named person. So it's the Royal Ontario Museum, and they actually used to do ghost tours there. Um, and they're like it's like one of the more haunted museums in Toronto. Like several people have seen like the ghost of the first curator, Charles T. Corelli, there. His office is actually still in the museum, and it's actually boarded up. You can see the door to it from one of the balconies on the second floor of the museum. It overlooks the main entrance. So people have seen him. There's supposedly a haunted painting of a this woman in this like long black dress with like a long tail in the sort of like late medieval gallery, and security guards have heard like sounds of like the tail being dragged around on the carpeted floors there. Um, my theory is this little girl is somebody who would have died of like cholera or something before the
Oh.
museum was built, and if you know a haunting was real, she would have been buried on the land that the museum was built on.
My second question is, what do you think she would have wanted to see in the movie theater?
I feel like an old like so there was actually a movie that we used to there's like a famous folk song. So the National Film Board is like I believe like a government sponsored like creative institution, and they did there's this a classic animated movie of this old Southern Ontario folk song called Black Fly, and it's about a guy who gets sent to North Ontario to work at like to work in the woods at like a logging camp, and about how his life is awful because of the black flies.
They're so gross. Oh.
It's a classic. If you look up the black fly song, it's very very catchy. I won't sing it. I'm an awful singer, but I feel like if I were to play something, I feel like oh this might remind her of like the old times. But the sweater is the movie that I would pick. That's like one of the classic Canadian animated films about a kid who really loves the Montreal Canadiens, and he wants to be like Maurice Richard, who's a famous hockey player, and but his mom orders the wrong sweater for him, and he gets a Toronto Maple Leafs sweater. And by sweater I mean jersey. The sweater's the old word for hockey jersey. And he like prays to God that God will send down all these moths to eat his Toronto Maple Leafs sweater, so he can get a Montreal Canadian sweater. Very Canadian.
Very Canadian, I was gonna say.
It's super Canadian. It talks about like Eaton, like the Eaton catalog.
What do you think? Like, why? So, was there anything that day that you remember when you witnessed this little girl that would have triggered her appearance to you? Or do you think, or have you shared this story with like coworkers and have other people
Oh yeah,
seen?
I talked about this before. Like people have seen the little girl at the
Oh,
museum
okay,
before.
okay.
Like it's like a
Oh.
common thing
So
for
she's a
folks who work at the
regular.
museum. She's a
Okay.
regular.
She's a
I,
regular.
she's a regular, but I suspect that like because the museum hosts educational programs for kids, it's like she gets to live a life that she normally didn't. You know,
Oh,
Oh.
that's kind of like my impression. It's not like a malicious ghost or anything.
Do you think she has any concept of what hockey is?
I actually don't know how old hockey is.
I don't
Like
know either.
how old
How
is
old is
hockey? I
how
gotta look
old?
this up. Let me look this up.
Oh,
Hockey. Oh, it's fairly old.
it is very old.
So yeah, she might have an understanding of hockey or like hockey related sports. I actually it's so funny you
Canadian.
talking about hockey because I was having a conversation with somebody about like what are some sports related things that maybe only a Canadian kid would get. Um, and one of the things that we settled on was if you have memories of you're a very Canadian person, if you have memories like childhood memories where you all yell car. You go car, because if you're playing street hockey,
Yeah.
and you yell car, that means a car's coming. And so the people have to grab the nets and pull them out of the streets. And we're like, that's like one of the most yelling car and associating with street hockey is one of the most Canadian things I can think of for me. I've never talked about hockey on anything public facing before, actually.
Now everyone's gonna think you're like a hockey fanatic. You're an expert on the sport.
I mean, I played, I could skate,
Oh my God,
but
expert.
I don't watch hockey anymore. Although I
We've,
am rooting for Ovechkin to overtake Gretzky.
we've never had a hockey expert on the show before.
No, but so I know nothing. Well, I know of hockey. I know of the concept of hockey, but specifically on ice, the blades, are they
Mhm.
dangerous? Like
Yeah,
they can like cut you, right?
yeah. A hockey player died recently.
Oh,
Yeah, so 2 years ago on October 28th, 2023, this ex-NHL player named Adam Johnson, he was playing in like a non-NHL league. His neck got cut by a blade and he died. He bled out on the ice.
Oh my
oof.
He like
God.
skated off and there was like blood everywhere.
Don't go ice skating,
Yeah,
like
I like
ever.
skates are very dangerous. Like that's why if you play hockey, when I was a kid, I remember wearing like a neck guard, like a specific neck guard that protects you.
And I just Googled. I was like, are there any hockey horror movies? Because that's kind of terrifying. And this we might have to throw this on here for a bonus episode. But there's a movie in 2018 called Apocalypse, which is a
Oh my
zombie
God.
apocalypse after after winning a championship cup, something goes awry.
Oh my
I just looked this up.
God.
It's got a 3.6 on IMDb. That means it's going to be great.
The reason I asked about how dangerous this blade is because I have an irrational fear of blades that shouldn't be scary. So like I cook a good amount and I have relatively okay knife skills.
Right.
But things in the kitchen that scare me are like the mandolin,
Oh,
where it's a
mandolin, like cutting your finger on a mandolin or like a
oh like
grater or something.
oh yeah,
Oh,
like it's
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
there's safety precautions there. I know it's in a fixed position, but I don't know why it scares me so much. So even though I know ice skates should be on the ice and not around any open flesh, the idea that this blade can get me is unsettling for me for some reason.
Yeah, there's also like, getting hit with a puck.
oh God,
Like, 'cause I don't know
yeah.
if you've ever held a hockey puck, but it's
Uh-uh.
just like a dense, literal puck of rubber.
Oh.
They hurt.
They hurt.
Yeah.
Wait,
And
Banana,
like
have
when
you
you
been
when
hit
you
by a
play
hockey
hockey,
puck?
like when you play
I
hockey, you like
used,
wear armor. You basically
yeah,
are wearing armor.
yeah. I used to have to play hockey for school and stuff, and it was terrible. I'm not a fan.
And they do it in gym too. Like in gym, you play hockey like
Yeah.
indoors. I remember doing that in high school too. There's like a famous hockey player. If you look him up, his name is Jacques Plant. And this was before people were really goalies didn't used to wear hockey like masks. People didn't wear helmets, like
That's
goalies too. And
no, that's
Jacques Plant,
bonkers.
he famously got hit in the face, and his face was all fucked up. And then he came out later wearing this mask, and it looks like something from a horror movie.
Danny, can you describe the image?
So this is a black and white image. It looks like this just happened. So there's blood stains on his white jersey, and it his nose is being covered by what I can assume is a bandage, but it looks like skin. So already kind of creepy. So it kind of flattens out his face, and he's holding off to the side, which looks like a mix between like Hannibal Lecter's mask and like an Iron Maiden mask.
Yep. And that was a homemade mask that he famously wore too. And like a part of his chin, like the skin here got like cut. It
Oof,
almost looked like it got torn off by the puck, and his nose was all fucked up and broken. And he
It's
went
so
out, and this
unfair.
happened basically at the start of the game, and he famously like went out, put with the mask on, and then they won that game. But like if you were to make a hockey horror movie, you would definitely want to at least reference Jacques Plant's mask, because I feel
That's
like
true.
you'd have to.
So I know we jumped around a little bit, but diving board.
Yes.
So, how many ghosts do you think inhabit that building?
As well, I mean, if you think that there are, if somebody is going to like haunt a place because they have like unfinished business there, it would be, the number would be equal to as many people as that jumped off that building. I don't know how many did, but like it was, it was the residents of that place, and the building is tall. Um, so there could be like over a dozen ghosts in that building.
Yeah, I was just doing a little research and I was trying to
Okay,
see like what the locals, the people that live there normally would say. And this kind of brings up a whole other question, but they were saying some claim that they could smell like perfume from an actress's door from an abandoned room. Others claim to have heard a thumping sound on the ground below after seeing
like
her bedroom window. Yeah. Kind of a twofold question. In a world where paranormal things do exist, do you think all of the senses can be activated? So, sight, people see ghosts. Now people are saying they can smell her perfume, they can hear things. But do you feel like what is the realm between taste and touch when it comes to maybe a haunting or like a paranormal moment?
what do you mean? Like what? Like do can all of the senses engage with the supernatural? Is that
Yeah.
more of the question? I
Yeah.
mean,
And
like so sight, like certainly because a lot of accounts are like visual accounts, right?
yep.
There's also like feeling because a lot of people, especially in like other like horror media, especially surrounding ghosts, people feel cold. Like there's that chill,
Mm.
right? There's the auditory senses of like hearing things, especially on like the wind and stuff like that. The smell is almost like a sensory memory, right? Like, and also you think about that with other supernatural elements like salt, the smell of sulfur and the demonic, and stuff like that. And then like touch is an interesting one because I feel like touch aligns with like the feeling of cold. Like I feel
Mhm.
like something like touched my shoulders or like touched my neck or something like that. I felt like a cold chill. And that's almost like something like running the fingers down your back. I feel like all of your senses are involved. And then like taste, I feel like there's a lot of horror media where people are eating something only to realize that it's rotten. So I feel like within the context of the supernatural, like all of your senses would be engaged. Because again, like we like as human beings, we can't perceive everything, right? And that's like scientifically proven, right? Animals like the mantis shrimp, for example, can see colors that are beyond the spectrum of what the human eye can even experience. So I think it's fair to say that there are things that we can't actually experience, or maybe some people can.
I'm pitching both of you guys as executive producers of my new movie, The Taste of Horror, where there is a sect of people that are born with extra taste buds that can taste the supernatural.
I thought you were gonna say, like, I'm gonna pitch you a restaurant where we're gonna
I
taste
thought something
scary
different.
stuff.
I thought this was going to be a travel show where we travel to haunted places to eat meals.
Oh,
Um,
All of the
because
above.
because
all of the above. Oh
I
my
do
God, yeah.
associate the Normandy with a meal because I was living not far from the Normandy. I was in that area for about a month, and there was a pizza place there, and I'm pretty sure I could find a picture of it too. But I had pizza with like barbecue pork on it in that
Oh,
area. Like I associate the two very closely.
Yeah.
I, well, I'm so, how much do you need?
Um, from you guys, just time, but if there's any
Okay.
angel investors out there, we will be looking for at least $10,000 because that will be the budget for the movie that we'll be talking about right after this break.
Hey listener, this is Banana in the future. Just wanted to give you a heads up that there will be spoilers for the movies that we're going to be talking about today. So, if you don't want to listen to any spoilers, then I would suggest that you watch the movie first and then come back and listen to the episode. All right, back to the show.
All right, let's get into the movie that we're here to talk about today, which is Versus. Versus is a 2001 Japanese film written by Ryuhei Kitamura and Yudai Yamaguchi and directed by Hey, Kitamura.
And I was telling both Banana and Daniel earlier, but in a feat of insomnia where I was struggling to fall asleep, I was like, might as well let's watch this movie because I'd never heard of it before. But uh, just to give you context, this is me reading a quick summary about it and not what I experienced, but it also is very aligned to the unexplainable experience of what I was watching in bed on my phone when reviewing this movie. But this film is about two nameless people who have been kidnapped by the Yakuza and then are being dragged through the forest when they find themselves in a compromising situation with zombies. But there's also samurais and gunfights and ghosts and um
Time
very
stuff? Time
uh,
hopping?
time
Just time
yeah,
hopping. It's more of a reincarnation theme.
Yeah.
reincarnation. Yeah, because the movie opens up uh like back in, I guess, feudal Japan times,
Hmm.
and then it time hops to modern day. But then I won't get too much into the future, but then there's another time jump. And again, I was trying to take all this in the wee hours of the morning, and I was like, whoa, this is unlike any other movie I've seen because it felt like, for me, it felt like a cut scene in a video game with all the different fight scenes that would happen. And like I mentioned earlier, when I was looking up budget wise, we always like to talk about budget when it comes to these movies. This was made with $10,000, which is definitely the lowest amount that we've seen across these movies. Some of them had lower budgets as well, but $10,000, and a lot of it, like, I would have assumed not $10,000. So they were on a shoestring budget. And even though it was campy and kind of over the top with some of the practical effects, I was drawn in with the how they shot it and how they kind of leaned into these weird wonky shots and how they travel with the talent and the blood splatters. Anyways, I was living in my bed and I couldn't really comprehend what I was watching, and it took me the full 2 hours to be like, I think I get it now.
I think this is a special movie. Like when we were talking about like what movie we are gonna like talk about for this episode, I thought that Versus would be the perfect pick because if we're gonna talk about like Asian like horror movies and horror stories and stuff like that, you need to pick something that is just like so out there and so different for your audience, right? Versus is really interesting because I wouldn't consider it like a pure horror movie, but I think you would need to do an entire episode to even determine like what your qualifications are for a horror movie.
Mhm.
Like Versus for me really leans in on several like one specific horror subgenre that I like, and it's the splatter genre.
Mhm.
There is like a really fantastic film that if this wasn't about Asian stories that I would recommend, and it's called Brain Dead. So in the 90s, before he was famous for The Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson made horror movies. And so splatter movies, just for context, are like horror films that focus on gore. And Peter Jackson made this zombie movie called Brain Dead. I think it came out in like 92. And it's considered the goriest movie of all time. And there's a really famous scene where the protagonist is facing off against a horde of zombies, and he uses a lawnmower, and he like goes through them with a lawnmower. And this is the 90s, so it's all practical effects. And so I would have picked that one, but I think a lot of people don't think about like the sort of like gonzo films that kind of blend genres as a horror movie. And Versus is super unique because, like, you're right, it combines all of these different genres. In my mind, it's the fantasy genre, it's the horror genre, it's the splatter subgenre of horror, but it's also like the Hong Kong like gun fu genre.
Yeah.
It's like if you took Highlander and you basically mash it together with Hard Boiled and Brain Dead, and you got Versus. It is one of the most like unique zombie movies of all time. There is nothing else like Versus.
I just looked up Brain Dead and I just realized that it also goes by the name Dead Alive, which is how I'm familiar with
Oh,
it. So I didn't realize it was the same movie. But I totally see what you're saying with how yeah, it's definitely like it's got similarities there. Um, how did you come across Versus? Like, when was the first time you saw it?
oh, I the first time I saw Versus was in like high school. Like I don't talk about this a lot of my like I think most people and folks who may recognize me who listen to this show would know me for like tabletop gaming stuff. I love zombie movies. I have like a there are two genres of movie that I really enjoy. First one is the zombie movie genre. I think I have a collection. I think I have like I don't know like 100, 200 zombie movies on DVD.
Oh my
Like I
gosh.
love zombie movies.
Yeah.
And the other genre is like Hong Kong blood opera. So like John Woo's movies, like Hard Boiled and The Killer and stuff like that. Um, and so I was introduced to Versus kind of like organically um, when I was like doing my deep dive into um, what a zombie movie could even be. And like Versus is like one of those outliers, right? If you look at zombie movies, there are many that kind of like change the format around, right? Versus is one of the first zombie movies that put a really heavy emphasis on like action and combined that sort of splatter genre that like Peter Jackson was famous for with there's a Japanese film genre called chambara, which is like kind of like the Japanese equivalent of like a Western movie, but focusing on samurai and swordplay. Um, Plus, obviously, the heroic bloodshed genre. So, like, I discovered like Versus through that, and I think it's one of my favorite Asian zombie films. I think if most people would think about like Asian zombie films, they'll say like Train to Busan. It's probably the most famous one. Everybody's seen it, or people have watched like Kingdom, that TV series on Netflix. I think Korea right now is producing some like incredible zombie stuff. Um, but Japan is not well known for its like zombie media outside of anime, right? Um, but Versus is just like so unique. So for me, it was something I like naturally discovered. There are other zombie movies that I would recommend that kind of bend the genre a little bit or like take it in an interesting direction. Like Brain Dead is one of them because it's splatter sort of like alignment. Another one is Wreck. It's a Spanish zombie movie. Have you folks seen Wreck?
I think I've seen
Mm-mm.
Wreck.
I think a lot of people know Wreck for its American remake. There's an American remake starring Jennifer Carpenter from Dexter called Quarantine.
Oh,
But
I don't think
Wreck
I've
was a
seen
Spanish movie, and it was the first zombie movie I had ever seen that had a large budget and was a found footage film. And it follows this like news crew, like a morning news crew, and they're doing like a profile on this like firefighting sort of like house. And they join them for a call at this apartment, and then they get quarantined into this apartment, and there's like a zombie outbreak. But
Is
it is not a biological zombie outbreak. It's like a demonic one. And there are
I
like
saw on Shudder.
there are several Wreck movies. I think there are four of them. The first two are phenomenal. The second one was one of the few zombie movies that legitimately scared me. Wreck 3 was not a found footage movie, and nor was Wreck 4. They are not as good. Wreck 3 is like all right. It's kind of like a splatter zombie film, but Wreck 1 and 2 are like incredible zombie movies because they're just so different from anything else that I've ever seen. Uh, but yeah, like I to go back to your question, Danny, like I just discovered Versus because I was an enthusiast and I was just looking for something more. Like if you go to the zombie genre, you're gonna find crazy shit. There's a movie called Zombie 2. It's zombie without the E, and in it, a zombie fights a shark. But this movie was made in the 70s. And so it's a dude in a zombie costume fighting a real shark.
Oh
And
my
the
God, I
shark
love
bites
it.
off his arm. It's bonkers. It's bonkers. There's like you're gonna get everything from the zombie genre, which is again why I think Versus is cool because Versus is kind of like this like nexus of multiple genres, right?
it.
You're gonna get like there are zombie comedies like folks have seen like Shaun of the Dead. It's technically a horror film. It's a horror comedy. Like Wreck is like a supernatural zombie film. Train to Busan is like a high octane like action zombie film, kind of like the Dawn of the Dead remake, right? The 2005 Dawn of the Dead remake. I think it came out in 2005. Then there's like the zombie romance. There's like several zombie romance films. Most famous being like Warm Bodies with Nicholas Hoult, who's going to be Lex Luthor in the new Superman movie.
Mhm.
Like the zombie genre is just so diverse, and so yeah, I wanted to pick Versus because of that. It's one of my favorite zombie movies.
I know you, so now that I know that you're a zombie movie enthusiast, me and my partner, another podcast called How Did This Get Made? They cover kind of B, C grade films and they just kind of talk about it. But we just recently went to one of their live screenings of a movie called Surf 2. Have you heard of this movie?
No, I'm gonna look it
Okay.
up right now.
So they have zombies in it, but I know
Oh,
we're
like the '80s movie?
the 80s movie, yeah. So it's Surf 2. It's comedy first, zombie-esque after.
Adding this
Uh,
to the list.
but Surf 2 to to give context of how out there this movie is. This movie is called Surf 2. There was never a Surf 1, and the tagline for Surf 2 is the end of a trilogy. So the movie is called Surf 2 End of a Trilogy. It's the only surf that's ever been made, and there was never a surf one. In this movie, this evil scientist nerd is jealous of jocks and creates zombies by feeding them cola, Buzz Cola. And they turn
Oh
into
yeah.
these zombies, and they're not, I guess, my original idea of what a zombie is. You know, they're not looking to eat brains. They're more so they can eat inorganic things and they kind of turn into this like punk rocker wearing chains and whatever. All of that to say is that the zombies in this movie Versus also didn't necessarily follow what I traditionally think as zombies. Of course, they were resurrected, but I actually think that's more of like a reincarnation theme if I think about the movie as a whole. But the fact that I saw zombies with guns in this movie and they could talk, kind of was like, oh, okay, so this is this is a departure from, I guess, my Western seated knowledge of what zombies is. But me and Banana do like to talk about like in other movies that we've covered, we talked about like ghost mechanics, like how do ghosts function in this world?
Mhm.
So what are your thoughts on the zombie mechanics of this world? Obviously, we are in uh this forest. What it was called, like the
It's like a
forest of,
resurrection forest.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're buried there, you get resurrected as a zombie. So but what are the mechanics here? Because it didn't seem like they wanted to eat brains, but they did come back to life. But I don't know.
Yeah, what's the world building of Versus?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
how did these zombies, like when nobody's around to fight, are they sleeping? Are they
Because there
like
was
what's
that
going on?
one, yeah, there was that one scene where the guy like ate a heart, like he took a bite out of it.
Yeah,
Like,
so the guy who ate the heart is the reincarnated version of the priest.
mhm.
He's the priest in the
Yeah.
beginning. Um, so my interpretation, so I guess for the audience, from a world building perspective in Versus, there are all of these like gates around Earth, and they connect to what is essentially hell. Um, and one of these gates is in this forest in Japan, and that's like the Forest of Resurrection. And my interpretation is that like there is like some sort of solar or lunar event that allows these gates to be opened. And there is this priest who is like the main antagonist, I say quote unquote, without spoilers, of the movie, who wants to get this like dark power. And he needs two keys. Um, and so I think that the zombies basically get resurrected or arise because of violence and because of the timing of the story. Because this isn't a world where zombies are well known. Like these yakuza are like surprised when something happens, and I think this is all about like fate, right? These this one convict who's the main character. The convict is meant to meet up with this kidnapped woman, and by chance, they discover that the dead come back to life, and I think that's because of their meeting. I think they're fated and they're destined to meet again, and when they are in the same place, it activates this forest,
Mhm.
and things get crazier and crazier when like the Yakuza boss, who is the reincarnated version of the priest, arrives. And that's when the movie starts to really take off. We start to see like new things with the zombies. Like he's able to resurrect people. He's able to control them. And that's where like it's almost like the rules of the world actually change like over time. Very interesting to me. So that's my interpretation, is that it's like it's a cyclical thing, and it's about and it's activated when these core characters arrive at the forest. And it's almost like their presence makes the gate or portal visible. And it's that visibility that resurrects the dead. Because again, like these gangsters they established in the movie have been coming to this forest to dump bodies for years. That's why there were so many zombies there. Mm-hmm. But the zombies had never come back to life. But I also think there are some things that are just there for the cool factor. Like who buries a zombie with a gun? Like some of these zombies come out and they all have guns, right?
I love that.
I have an unhinged question. Is this a trope that we see a lot in Japanese media? Because we saw the Sailor Moon live show, I think it was like a couple of weeks ago, and it made me remember a lot from the actual anime and the manga, where it's several people who have been reincarnated, and when they meet for the first time, suddenly they remember all the stuff that happened in their past lives, and it's like they're like fated to meet, and there's that trope of like, you know, way years and years, centuries ago or whatever, in their past lives there were like, you know, all these events that have taken place that were either apocalyptic or have been like these huge world-changing events that will ultimately happen again because they have now met again. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's an Asian thing, because like in Buddhism, there's the concept of reincarnation.
That's true, yeah.
Right, and you see this in not just in horror, right? Like you mentioned Sailor Moon. There's also a famous like Chinese movie. It's like a not really wuxia. It's like a fantasy martial arts movie starring Jackie Chan, and also Tony Leung from like, you know, everybody knows him from Shang-Chi, but also from Hard Boiled. Called The Myth. And The Myth is Jackie Chan plays this like sort of like general type character and it's a love story, but he gets reincarnated as an archaeologist who it actually uncovers this story and realizes that he is a part of this story. So like reincarnation is like a very Buddhist theme, and we see that like all over Asia.
In The Myth, he sings the soundtrack too.
He sings,
I just remember
it's a
that.
very, very good song too.
Yeah, it's surprisingly good.
Well, he's a trained singer. Jackie Chan has released so many albums.
I didn't
like
know
he's
that.
Oh yeah, he's like well, he was trained as like at the Peking Opera School, but he's released tons of like canto and mando pop albums. He was the singing voice for Shang in Mulan. Like he sings "I'll Make a Man Out of You," but in Chinese.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Like he is an accomplished singer. It's not like oh, I'm gonna dabble in singing like Scarlett Johansson did. It's like
Not ScarJo.
Wait,
ScarJo on the Spooky Asian.
Yeah, ScarJo. I mean, this is an Asian podcast, right?
It was bound to happen.
We're the Ghost of the Shell. No, Scarlett Johansson released.
Sang.
Yeah, well, sings.
You know,
but she released like an album years and years ago.
What?
I don't know why I know this.
Wait, what? I'm looking this up right now.
Yeah, she released 2 albums. I had to look this up. First one's called Anywhere I Lay My Head, and then the second one is called Breakup. Wow. And the second one, she did it with Pete Yorn. But yeah, Jackie Chan sings the song from The Myth. I think most people know The Myth for that song.
Yes. Yeah, that song is pretty catchy.
But yeah, I think to go back, I think Versus is very much that explicitly playing with that theme of reincarnation. And I think, and I don't know if I'm 100% right on this, but I think within like reincarnation, the cycle of reincarnation kind of breaks when you reach enlightenment or something like that, which kind of makes sense in this movie because we see the same plot happen twice, or actually 3 times, right? In in like the feudal Japanese era, in the present, and then we see it repeat itself, but with a twist in the future.
And the twist is dun dun dun.
Do we want
it? We can explain it. Wait,
this is the twist. Well, the twist.
This is not a spoiler-free zone.
Okay, so the twist is that the prisoner, the main character, so for context, in the feudal Japanese storyline, he is this like samurai who's protecting seemingly this princess, and this dark priest and his sort of like minions want her to open up this gate in the same forest. Um, but in the past, the samurai or the swordsman actually kills the princess to prevent the gate from being opened. He then is brutally murdered by the priest and his minions. They get reincarnated in the present, but they initially don't know the relationship with one another. And it repeats itself again, except this time the swordsman, who is the convict or the prisoner, kills the priest. But then at the end of the movie, the world is super like dystopian because he's gone mad with power or whatever. And the princess is now his like captive. He's become a villain, and the priest is now the hero. And it ends with like this like really dramatic clash of swords and then the title. But I think it's really interesting because like the movie doesn't necessarily make sense, and I think some of the fun of the movie it lies in the fact that it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
When I was thinking about like the deeper themes of like we kind of get introduced to the main, like I didn't even put the two and two together until I was just like trying to piece together this movie. But when I was following this kind of convict, and it seemed like his story was like redemption. He was like, I might have done some bad stuff like in this current past life, which when I was watching, I was like, oh yeah, he got arrested, whatever, and now he wants to kind of prove himself that he is a good person. But then if you knowing kind of like the full plot of the movie and how depending on what time you are, you can be the hero, you can be the anti-hero, or you can be the villain at any given point. So then like it brings up this like philosophical question of like how do you make decisions based on what life throws at you? And then does it even matter? Because in your next life that you get resurrected in, do your past lives even impact that? Because technically you're being brought into this situation by fate. It is going to repeat itself, but do the past lives affect how you're going to possibly make decisions in your future lives? And I'm just kind of getting in this like weird, like, dang, does anything even
Does that
matter?
so does that kind of theme like interest you? Is that something that like you like to see in media?
I don't know. I feel like now that I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking about the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, when this was it's more
Yeah.
Mhm.
what is
Multiverse sort of stuff.
multiverse, which is kind of, you know, I don't know how multiverses on like a, let's say, everything's happening all at once and then you can jump times versus generations. Like, I don't know if it's like kind of going up and down versus left and right. I don't know how multiverses work or
I
reincarnations
think it's
work.
almost like they're parallel, and I think that when we're looking at reincarnation stories, we're looking at things that are recurring. There is a really good comic called Regression. Have you folks ever read Regression?
Yeah, is that the one by
It's by Cullen Bunn.
yeah, I love the
Regression
comic.
is a really interesting story about past lives and how they impact your present, and the idea of continuity between your past lives and how dark forces can kind of chase you through time. Cullen Bunn also wrote a comic called The Empty Man,
Love the
uh,
Empty Man.
which became a very, very good film with James Badgedale, who's done a ton of really interesting horror stuff, actually.
It's very the comic and
Very different. They're very
the
different.
movie are very different.
But the movie is pure vibes. It's like
Mhm.
the like very interesting horror vibes. It doesn't necessarily make sense, but you're there because it just looks really neat.
Yeah.
Highly recommend it, but not an Asian movie. So
I just realized, like, as we're talking about this, as we're talking about, like, reincarnation and fate, and cycles, it reminded me of our previous episode with Jasmine when we were talking about Tumbad. And in that movie, it also has that, because it also acts in like three generations, right? It's three different generations, how they react to this basically this goddess's womb. and the lengths that people will go in order to achieve X amount of wealth, infinite wealth, whatever, right? And it made me think, I mean, I feel like we're very good at, planning out these movies and these themes and like trying to connect everything together, even if it's unintentional. But
Oh,
second
you
of
didn't have to
all,
say it wasn't unintentional. It was totally intentional.
yeah, cut that out, Marcus. It was totally intentional. But also it made me think that, like, yeah, this is definitely a recurring theme in a lot of Asian media. Like, we've said this already before, where the idea of reincarnation, the idea of things acting in cycles, it's just like it feels like it does permeate through a lot of different types of Asian media, probably because, it's influenced heavily by Buddhism, Taoism. I just
Well, it's
realized
like
that.
you kind of take what's relevant to your audience, right? And then you tell stories about that. I think it's cool that you folks are like looking at and it's like spotlighting Asian horror movies because I think horror movies are such an interesting way at looking what is examining what is like meaningful to a culture. Because like horror movies kind of like either twist that or like undo it or like intentionally degrade those meaningful things. And it gives you like an interesting perspective on it. I don't know. I think I'm just glad we were talking about verses, to be quite honest, because nobody does.
So if we think about in this movie, and again, all of this is kind of speculation, and we can talk about influences right after this, but if we know that what from what we've saw, killing like doing what you think is for the better good, aka killing someone so that the gates of hell don't open, um, doesn't necessarily stop it. So that was the past first scene we saw. And then we see that doing good in the present time might feel good to the ego, but then knowing in the future that ego or that decision has now made you evil. Like what do you think if this movie wasn't just like this splatter horror weird zombie action movie, what do you think this movie was trying to explain, or like knowing that even if in this life you're trying to do your best, that in a next life you could be the villain? Like what does that
Like
mean?
the futility of your effort.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
mean,
Like
that in
that's
and of itself could be horrific, right?
yeah,
Like in the
terrifying.
past, you could
Yeah.
say like, oh, he did all he could. He was too late to save the other samurai who died at the beginning of the movie. He had to kill the main the princess. I think they kind of frame her as a princess. He had to kill her. He had to perform a bad deed in order to prevent something awful from happening, even though that never happened.
Yeah.
Because like I maybe the theme there is that like you can't prevent something awful by doing something equally
Awful.
awful,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right? I think in the present, it's very much like he tries to prevent something awful by committing murder, but then that power corrupts him, or he develops a god complex, which is kind of where the movie ends, right? He develops his god complex because now he is aware of what's going on, right? He
Yeah.
is aware of these gates. It's almost like dark enlightenment
How can you prevent all of this from happening? Like, what are some thoughts? We can brainstorm. We can
from
workshop
like a
this.
world building perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's take it one more um generation slash like one more reincarnation cycle. So now we know that he is in this post-apocalyptic world. Time jump after this, clash versus we get a versus two versus
And they were
again.
and they were going to try to make a sequel
Oh,
too.
were they?
It never happened. Yeah, it never
Oh,
Oh,
happened.
dang. Okay, so now we are tasked to say, what is the opening scene of Versus 2? We see the clash. Everything's post-apocalyptic at the end of Versus 1.
I've
Next,
thought a
this
lot
is
about this.
okay. Yes, amazing. Go.
Versus two would have the same structure to versus one. They would be like parallel to one another, how they start. Except versus two starts off with the flashback, but the flashback is actually around the priest and why the priest's motivations. Because we're just kind of told that the priest is the bad guy. But is he actually the villain? And at the end, you kind of question whether or not he's the villain. So Versus 2 would start off with a flashback, but it's the priest, and we get some context about his motivations, right? Um, Potentially with a bigger budget, we learn more about like how the world fell, because at the end, it's very post-apocalyptic. So does that mean that the convict was able to like access these gates of hell and then gain demonic power? Because now it becomes a fantasy movie, right? Um, if he does have this demonic power, then it's about removing that power and then sealing all of the gates with some sort of great sacrifice. If it's not that, and he is just manipulating the world because of his knowledge, and maybe the undead, or maybe he like travels to all of these different gates. Maybe now that he has an understanding of them, he can perceive them. And by going to these gates, he's awakening the dead. And because he is the key, and the woman is also a key, he has kept her captive. She has seen that he is now raising the dead and using the fact that they are these like really important sort of people who have affinity to hell. He's using that to manipulate the undead. Maybe he's controlling them. Maybe people who align themselves with him are safe. And so he's going around the world and he is awakening the dead, and they're causing chaos everywhere. People don't know what to do. People have no understanding of it. And that's how he's become the villain. And now this priest's job is to basically kill him and just like end the cycle.
Yeah, because if we've only seen one portal, and that's the
Yeah, what
Forest of
about where
Resurrection.
else are them? Are there other people
Yeah.
who have a similar sort of like goal in mind? Is this
Yeah.
like is there
Are
an
there other keys?
organization? Yeah,
Yeah.
are there organizations dedicated to this? Is there like a like to reference like tabletop gaming, is there like a Delta Green
Yeah.
organization that's meant to like contain these things? Or if you look at like sci-fi horror games like Control, are there like agencies that isolate them and erase human understanding of them? Perhaps through killing?
Because we know that there's
Potentially.
666 portals.
Yeah, and you can't,
And
and we're not going to be able to get rid of them. We just have to basically erase them from human perception and understanding. So that would mean getting rid of people who are aware of their existence.
yeah, or getting rid of the keys before they find
Yes.
out, before they can figure out that in a previous life or something that they were keys in the past.
And are they the keys to the Japanese portal, or are they keys to all of them? Right? Perhaps there are more, and there are people who maybe are, have been touched by like dark forces. I think the sequel would have to dive into the world building if they are to end the cycle. Otherwise, the sequel will be a rehash of the original. So
Mhm.
you basically have like a very narrowly focused like first movie, and then the second movie maybe becomes a mini series a instead of a movie, kind of like what they did with John Wick when they expanded on the Continental Hotel. They did the TV series, The Continental.
My question, another world building question is, we have one portal in Japan in the Forest of Resurrection. Where do you think another portal is?
I think it's a see if I were to world build around Japan, I would world build around like landmarks. So in Japan, there are these like tombs, um, and they're called kofun. They're like these giant burial mounds that actually look like keyholes. So Kofun, if you look them up, they're like keyholes. So what I would do is I would make these the gates, right? And they're literal keyholes, right? And then if I were to do it around the world, I would pick like archaeological sites. I'd pick like the pyramids in Egypt. I would pick like Cahokia in like North America. I would pick like Teotihuacan. I'd pick all these like famous archaeological sites, and they are landmarks that are basically used to worship these gates. Or maybe these landmarks are designed to keep the gates sealed. And with the development of the modern world and the fact that we don't care about the past anymore, people are demolishing these seals. I think you could go in many different directions, but that's what I would do. I would make them aligned with like archaeological like landmarks.
So zombies in this movie, I feel like weren't as important as like the like zombies were cool, but it could have been any other kind of supernatural monster. I know we have this like force, like resurrection force, but if it were to take place in another area, do you think zombies are important to the DNA of
I don't think
versus?
zombies are ever important to a zombie movie, which is really weird to say. I think my favorite zombie movies are movies that kind of use the zombies as a tool to create tension between the human characters, right?
Yeah.
Like the scariest parts are the interactions between people, right? You look at like the original Dawn of the Dead and the remake, it's like people trapped in a shopping mall during a zombie apocalypse. The zombies are slow and you can outrun them, and yes, the horde is dangerous. But the scary part of the horror comes from the fact that you are isolated with people from various backgrounds,
Mhm.
right? Um, there was a um, there was a recent Korean zombie movie called Hashtag Alive. I
Oh, I
think it's
saw
on
that one.
Netflix. It's
Yeah.
on Netflix, and it kind of deals with like what's the scary part of that? Is like the scary part is like the isolation that we're seeing in like modern society,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
the
And
zombies are there to ramp up the tension and stuff like that.
yeah, I really
But I
like that take
yeah
because people were it had this idea uh of watching other people's tragedies on your phone and trying to learn from them. So this uh you're spectating. It's everything is a spectacle, even as the person across the way in this apartment complex is dealing with it. You're just on your phone watching or
yeah.
seeing this. It's
But that's
wild.
that. But I think that's a commentary on like the voyeurism of modern
Mhm.
social media,
Yeah,
right? We're just looking at each
100%.
other's lives, but during the
Mhm.
apocalypse.
Hmm.
Um, you think of I don't know, I think the zombies just kind of act as a way of ramping up really awful aspects of humans,
Yeah.
right? It's why we see looting. It's in the zombie movies because yeah, the zombie apocalypse happens and then people just turn into their most awful selves,
Mhm.
and
But
that's
in
the purpose of them.
versus,
But in
yeah, but
versus, I think the zombies are there uh, to kind of hey, I think they're fodder for really good action.
yeah, and you could
uh,
like you shoot them, you can
it,
chop them, punch through their head.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they're there, I think, to also reinforce the supernatural element of it. Because if you were to say like, oh, this is a gate to hell, we could have demons, and they're like they're summoning demons. But if I only have $10,000 and I'm going to make a movie about like gates to hell and stuff like that, I don't have the budget in the year 2000 to actually make CGI demons and stuff like
Yeah,
that. So zombies are also a low budget way of communicating to the audience that there is something unnatural about this forest as well.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
I
But
have
that goes
thought too
back
much
to
about this.
no, that's good. But that goes back to my original question. If this was not in this resurrection forest and zombies weren't this supernatural force, what would it be?
I think it would have to be some sort of monster. Like it could be ghosts.
Yeah,
Um, I think ghosts would be an interesting one too because they are naturally things that live between like two worlds. Like they exist in this liminal space outside of like human perception most of the time. They're not quite dead. They're not quite alive. I think ghosts are a really good one. I personally wouldn't do like demons because then you have to think about like, well, are they like sentient? And then we have to think about the impact they have on the world and the more sentient the demons are, the more agency they have and the more impact they have on the story beyond just being there as terrifying things.
so again, any angel investors out there that want to see this movie continue, this movie franchise, hire us to plan out up to versus six, and then we can renegotiate after versus six.
We
I would
might
go up
need
to
a little bit
four because
more.
four is an unlucky number.
I
Go up to
Oh
know,
four.
yeah.
but we skip four. It'll go versus two, three, five, six.
Yeah.
Ooh,
And then people will think that we have a four, but we don't have a four.
and they'll
And
look
that's,
for it.
And they'll
yeah, they'll
look
look
for it.
for it. It'll be
It'll
like
drive up
marketing.
SEO. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's smart. I never would have thought of that.
To wrap this all up, I was going to talk about the influences. So I did see that referenced some American directors as some influences. So Sam Raimi of the Evil Dead series, which
Yep.
I can see, John Carpenter, who famously for Halloween, and then George Miller, who did Mad Max, but also did Babe and Happy Feet. So he took like a little departure and then came back to Mad Max. Even Japanese directors had some American influences, but we talked earlier in the season of Spooky Asian Club, we talked about how things like The Ring and The Grudge got remade. So this movie Versus came out the same time that the American remakes of The Ring and The Grudge came out. Meaning that both The Ring and The Grudge were kind of released back in the 1900s, before the 2000 period. So, what do you think, like thinking about what if we didn't have this Japanese, again, all speculation. We didn't have this Japanese one-two punch of these ghostly girl specter with long black hair, the Victorian girl that showed up
In my
in your
Oh my
theater.
God.
in the museum, yeah.
Oh,
Full
anyways, so
circle.
if we didn't have that in the 2000s, and for whatever reason, this movie Versus got a lot of Western attention, how do you think horror in general might have changed, or like how we see these zombie action films? I know that's kind of already a genre, but do you think this could have had a bigger cultural impact on like how we see Japanese J horror as it were now?
That's super interesting because I
Yeah.
think all of the things that Versus does have been done before it, right? If you think of like super over the top action, right? Where you have like really outlandish characters, you have well choreographed action. That all happened like 3, 4 years before Versus and in Hollywood, and that's the movie Face Off,
Mhm.
right? One of the like the John Woo's best Hollywood movies, right? Face Off with Nicolas Cage and John Travolta is so over the top, it's so out there, very similar to how the characters are portrayed in Versus.
Yep.
The kind of gore you see in Versus that already happened, with movies like Brain Dead, but also like in like Japanese movies, the kind of blood you see. Uh,
Takashi Miike. Yeah.
yeah, or even like before that, like Akira Kurosawa movies.
Mm, yeah.
Um, and that Akira Kurosawa, the famous like production blunder where the blood spurts out, and they just kept that cut in the movie. That was unintentional, but that became a trope in Japanese action media, right? In anime and like live action stuff. That blood spurt is from a production mistake. We see all those things. Like I think Highlander came out before Versus. Highlander is very similar to Versus as well. I think if like Versus had gotten like a huge international audience, I think it would have continued the late 90s, early 2000s run of action blockbusters. Like
Yeah.
so like the Jean-Claude Van Dammes, the
Mm.
Stallones, you know, I mean, you could say Nicolas Cage, John Travolta, Tom Cruise. I think we'd be seeing more action blockbusters, but blended with other genres, right? Because when you look at action blockbusters, it's always about like cops and robbers, right? It's always about police, it's always about bank robbers, like Heat and things like that. But I think if Versus got a lot more international attention and there was like a monetary incentive to try to replicate Versus, we would see the blending of genres. We would see like action fantasy movies combined with horror, or we'll have like horror movies with gun fu, like the Christian Bale movie Equilibrium. That's just a sci-fi action movie, but imagine if Equilibrium was a horror movie.
Mhm.
That's what I think we'd see more of. Just like this blend, this like weird gonzo mashup of genres. Like, people just take more risks because Versus is very much it very much reads as somebody who said, I only have one shot at making a movie. I'm going to make the movie I want. And it's going to be about all the things that I love. That's Versus. But yes, so
Yeah.
my answer to your question would be I think if Versus got more attention, the effect it would have on the industry is people taking more creative risks and blending genres.
I kind of love that. But I also still love I don't know. We talk about a lot about how Western Hollywood, the Hollywood itself took a lot from the Japanese culture, uh, and Japanese stories in this kind of J horror boom in the early 2000s. But I kind of want to live in this future where they took took some notes from verses, and we have more maybe like risk taking. I think what you said was like I have one chance to make a movie and I'm going to make it for all I want. Like I think that's such a cool like that's like pulling from your gut and your passion rather than trying to recreate something just
That's why we're always seeing remakes and cookie cutter stories. Like
yeah.
Yeah.
Versus, there is nothing like Versus. And imagine a world where the film industry, where every movie that came out was different. You know,
Yeah.
like Everything Everywhere All at Once was so different, right?
Yeah.
But that was so
Mhm.
unique. But imagine if like every couple of months there was a new Hollywood blockbuster and it was just so different from anything else.
Mhm.
Like how awesome would it be to be a movie fan?
Yeah.
And we're not dealing with like remakes all the time.
And then the last thing I want to bring up, because we mentioned both Sailor Moon
Yeah.
and this movie, with this kind of time travel between or time hops between um generations. Have y'all seen Madoka Magica and all
I
of its
know it.
No.
Okay, so that's everybody's homework assignment is to watch this series. It's a pretty short series. I think it's only like maybe 10 episodes, but there's also like follow-up movies and stuff. But you've kind of followed this basic plot of magical girls, and she is a young girl. She has a group of friends. They're all kind of color blocked with pink and yellows and stuff, and they are pretty much living this life, and they kind of get pulled, and they have to fight these quote unquote witches. And witches in this realm are the people that cause things like suicide or people to fall in depressions. And these girls, these young girls, have to pretty much commit their lives to becoming the saviors. Um, so again, because y'all have not seen this, I will not spoil it, but there's some really cool time loop stuff in this that is interesting that we both mentioned Sailor Moon and versus how Versus showed these kind of three different time cuts that I'm like,
There's
uh
only 12 episodes of this, so I'll definitely
yeah,
watch this.
watch it and then watch the
Excited.
movie right after. It's
Yeah.
they do
There's a
such a good job.
movie?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I'm
so good.
100% gonna watch this. You know, and there's another interesting potential time jump thing, completely unrelated to horror, but definitely anime. The new Gundam series.
Mm.
Uh,
Oh.
Mobile Suit Gundam G-Quux is the new series that's starting up. Saw the movie last month. It's it's Gundam, but with some time travel elements.
Oh.
Very, very interesting.
Dang. We've talked about time travel a good amount on this podcast,
We
actually.
have.
Well, there's something horrific about time travel. I remember at my job, we used to do this thing when the team was smaller. It's like a question of the day. And I remember one of the questions being like, if you can go back in time to any part of the past, what would it be? And everybody's like, oh, I'd go to the Middle Ages, blah, blah, blah. I'd do this. And I'd be like, if I went back there, I'd be dead.
Yeah.
There's something horrific about that, right?
Yeah.
Because when we think about time travel, we often map our modern experience and our expectations of society in the present to the past, and that is not the
Yeah.
case. There's something super scary about time travel,
Yeah.
especially if you're a minority.
Have you
Hmm.
seen Caddo Lake yet?
No.
It's terrifying. It's exactly what you're saying, but in movie form. And there's also some weird family stuff as well, but highly recommend it. Not going to spoil it, but
Oh,
there's a lot of time
this is like a
jumping.
newish movie. Yeah. Oh,
It's
with Dylan
pretty
O'Brien
new.
from Maze Runner.
Yeah. Uh, it's great. It's got a lot of weird, weird back and forth time
Oh, I
stuff.
love that. But yeah, like time travel is terrifying. Like
Yeah.
it's truly terrifying because you never know like what if you like anything that you do could really fuck up the future. You could like you drop a little piece of garbage or something in the past and it could change the future profoundly. Like there's something terrifying about that.
I would
And
probably just go back to like yesterday.
Yeah, limited time travel for sure. Yeah. Or like what about time loops? Like what was that
Oh,
Tom Cruise movie? Yeah, basically, but it's based on a Japanese novel called All You Need Is Kill. Yeah, what is the movie called? Edge of Tomorrow? Yeah, Edge of Tomorrow
yeah.
was the American movie. But there is an animated version of that coming out actually. I
Oh,
think they're making an anime, but it's going to be truer to the original novel. But yeah, I think time travel is terrifying. Time loops are terrifying. Um, because again, like there are like the consequences to your actions are so grave.
uh-huh.
But also in that I think characters in time travel media tend to be unprepared for the literal culture shock of being in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah, from now you got me thinking existentially. So time loops are scary because we always, as humans, as we live today, are like, what would I have done differently, or what would I have said differently? And I think I might have talked to you about this, Banana, but I love the movie series Happy Death Day that has
Yes.
Mm.
taken this idea of Groundhog's Day, reliving the same day, but you have to figure out who your killer is because any wrong step, you're gonna die, and then you have to relive the day. So it's almost like it turns into like this murder mystery of like, how do I finish my game correctly so that I can relieve myself from this time loop? But I feel
Mhm.
like that speaks to me, or as a human experience, because we're always like, everything does kind of feel finite, like getting second chances in the bigger scheme of things. What would I have done 10 years ago? What would my life look like, 5 years ago if I didn't make this decision? It's scary to think about, like what could change, what couldn't change, not just for yourself, but for your family and your friends and your society, who you meet. It kind of
Mhm.
gets pretty deep, which is
Yeah, I
interesting
think
to
that's
think
what
about.
makes horror movies scary too, right? When you're talking about zombie movies, it's like the zombies aren't like the scary thing. It's like what humans do
Mhm.
when there's no law, right? That's why like movies like The Purge are
Yeah.
can be terrifying because
Mhm.
it feels so real,
Mhm.
right? Or like there's a really great horror movie. Because I have two recommendations for like horror/horror aligned movies, and the
Yep.
first one would be It Follows.
Oh, I
Like
I
love It
love It
It
Follows.
Follows is
Follows.
like a
Yes.
horror movie, but it is based on like it feels visceral and real. You know, it's based on like STDs, right? Um, but like it's scary. Right?
Yeah.
And the other one I feel like is related to our current times that could also feel scary. Is actually I wouldn't have recommended this because it's not an Asian movie, but it's called Upgrade.
Oh, I love
Um,
Upgrade.
Upgrade is a horror movie.
I
I think
love it. It's so
and a lot of
good.
people don't consider Upgrade a horror movie because they just think of it as a cyberpunk movie.
Hmm.
But Upgrade is a horror movie about our reliance on AI.
Yeah, it's really good. I think that at the time it was made, it was around the same time that I probably told you this, Danny, but it was around the same time that Venom came out as well. And so I mixed the two
They're very
up
similar. Yeah, they're
because,
very
yeah,
similar.
like the concept is very similar because you're being overtaken by some other, like another entity in your body. And also the actors look very similar. I'm sorry to say it,
That's
but they
valid. They're both white dudes.
right. And like I know that one of them was actually in one of my favorite movies, The Invitation. So in Upgrade, that actor was in The Invitation. So that's how I can tell that that's how I went to go see Upgrade. I was like, oh, he was also in The Invitation. All right, I'm going to go see that. Um, and then I saw Venom, and those two movies are definitely very different.
I recommend Upgrade. It's very good. It's another actually, you know what? Upgrade is the perfect encapsulation of what I want the movie industry to do. You know how I said like I want to see people blending genres? Upgrade is literally blending cyberpunk, martial arts action, and horror.
One last time loop thing, and then we'll move on. Banana, we were just talking about Convergence and how that movie was made. Have you seen Convergence, Daniel?
I know of it, I have not seen it.
Oh, I think you would love it, but it's another time loop movie.
I'm gonna add it
And
to the
what were
list.
you saying, Banana, about like how it was like mostly improv or something?
Oh, Coherence.
Coherence. Sorry, not convert.
Coherence?
Yeah,
Yeah.
coherence.
Basically, from what I remember, the person who wrote the script didn't really write a script so much as an outline and gave it to the actors to recreate over and over again over the course of like, I think it was like 2 weeks or something. It was like a short time period. They rented a house and did all of this. And it's basically LARP. Like they just LARPed everything out, they improved everything out, and they didn't have a specific script to follow. And so a lot of the stuff that you would hear in the actual movie was just like ad-libbed, but they would
Hmm.
do it over and over and over again. And you see this like in the cut, like in the movie, right? So they would just like cut everything together and um by the end of it you find out that I mean, I don't know if you've seen it, Daniel. Did you see it, Daniel, or no?
No, I haven't seen it, but I'm looking at it right now and I want to watch it because this looks
Okay.
fantastic.
I will not tell you the spoiler. But yeah, it's very cool. The
Mhm.
ending is very cool. I think all of it, like the experimental nature of it, is also very cool.
I just love that we're talking about time loops and how Hollywood needs to do more weird shit.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
thought that we could not have anticipated that this would have been the topic?
Well, let's take a break. So now for your favorite part of the show that we called Slaughterboxd. So I have been tasked to find some funny, weird, and potentially unhinged reviews on Letterboxd, and Daniel and Banana will have to kind of guess what star rating is left, and feel free to play along at home. So remember, we're doing the 2001 movie Versus, and we'll start off I'm going to starting off with one from Derico Williams. Derico Williams left a comment and said, "Samurais? Yakuza? Zombies? Immortal evil beings? Martial arts? What more could I ask for?"
That's a positive review.
That's like a 5 out of 5.
I'm going to be careful here, and I'm going to say a 4.
This is a 5-star review.
That's what I would have written. That's what I would have written.
Okay,
Wow.
obviously Daniel is very good at this game.
The track record for this game, Daniel, is 0 out of 4. So you are already ahead of the curve. What if we do like a Slaughterboxd March Madness? I think
Oh my
Daniel would
God,
win.
yes.
Oh my
I think so
gosh.
too.
Oh,
Alright.
shit.
You're doing good. So I know we
Yeah.
were like very both amazed that you got it correct, but good
Okay,
job.
apparently, I'm
Yeah,
on it.
seriously,
Yeah.
not a lot of people get these right.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
Also, so you know, there can be half stars. So
Hmm.
usually I preface with it, but sometimes it gets into people's heads. I usually say if you think it's a half star up or down, go with your gut. But then knowing this, you can try to metagame it and then not go with your gut and stick with the half stars. All right, this one is from Angel Monkey. Fight, 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 fight. 30 solid minutes of exposition. Fight, 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 in all caps. End.
This is a
Huh.
3 or 3.5 star review.
Oh God, I was going to say the same thing. I'm going to say 3.
This is a 2-star review from Angel Monkey.
Oh wow.
It has the impression of somebody who's like, oh, I don't like the story, but I like the fights. And the all caps kind of
Yeah.
throws you off.
So this one is from Comrade Yui. And just so you know, these are all in italics until the very last one. So imagine italics with little asterisks. Unsheathes katana, teleports behind you, empties both of my deagles into your chest, chops off your arms and head, wipes your blood off my blade. Nothing personal, kid. ...
I feel like this isn't in between. I'm going to say
This
a
is a
4.
positive review because somebody who's like a gamer or into action movies would just say Deagles. The fact that they wrote Deagles says that. But they're not like an anime nerd because they're like teleport. Like it's meant to be like that they move fast. This is a positive review. I think this is a 4.
I was going to say 4 too.
I think it's a 4.
This is a 4-star review. Oh
Yeah.
my
Yes!
God.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Good job, Daniel. We should keep a leaderboard over the seasons.
Yeah, I think so too.
You're at the
Daniel's
top
got
of the leaderboard.
2
Crazy.
out of 4 is like
Wait, do people
incredible.
have people ever gotten this on the previous episodes?
Mostly not. Maybe one.
Yeah, maybe
Okay,
a
cool.
couple. Yeah, like 1 out of 4 is probably our
Okay.
Okay, cool.
score right now.
I think you might be
Asian
number one.
pass.
All right, this is our last one. This is from Leah. Leah writes, if your man doesn't declare himself a feminist and then fights a bunch of zombies in a 500-year-old evil dude for you, what's the point?
Oh my God, so true.
This is a
also
positive
feels like a
review.
4. Yeah, it feels like a 4.
But this person also didn't leave in the review that, or maybe they want it to be spoiler free because he becomes like super toxic.
That's true. He does become terrible at the
He
end.
becomes really awful at the end. And like he's kind
Uh,
of a misogynist because he keeps knocking her out.
yeah,
he
that's
keeps
During the
punching
movie.
her in the face.
He keeps punching her out
I was like, what the hell?
until the end where she's like, fuck
Yeah.
you, and she's
Yeah.
like he doesn't get her. I think it's a positive
Actually,
review. This one, I think this one's like a 3.5 max, 3.5. I think it's positive, but I don't think it's a 4.
I'm gonna stick to 4, I think.
This is a 3-star review.
Whew.
That
Oh my
half, yeah, that
God.
half will get you.
Oh
Yeah. Is
wow.
a 3 or a
Dang.
3.5? Yeah, but it's not positive because they clearly didn't like really get the movie and there
Hmm.
was no mention of the zombies, or maybe they didn't even watch the whole thing.
Yeah, they probably only watched half of it.
Yeah, which is why it's not like a glowing review because they definitely didn't watch the whole thing.
Or they really wanted to highlight that one part and then the rest of it just glossed over.
Yeah, or they were like that other reviewer who was like, "Oh, exposition, exposition, action, action, action," like that. They were like,
Yeah.
"In it for the story," and then they watched the action. It was like, okay, I'm
Dang,
50%. I passed,
that's good. You
50% is more
passed.
than everyone else,
and it was kind of close on
honestly.
some of the other ones too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for being a part of the first season of Spooky Asian Club. Please tell the audience who you are again, where to find you, maybe plug some projects you have.
My name's Daniel Kwan. You can find me online at Daniel H. Kwan on pretty much all social media platforms. I'm really only on Blue Sky because it's the least awful of them right now. But yeah, find me at Daniel H. Kwan. I write games. I talk about movies. I have 2 podcasts. If you're into tabletop games and like, Asian representation, I think it listens to Asians Represent podcast. If you like action movies and you like movies about bromance, you could check out the John Woo podcast. My co-host and I are watching John Woo's entire filmography and talking about each one. So very, very exciting. We just recently launched it. Our first episode was about Face Off, the classic Nicolas Cage movie. Second one will be about Hard Boiled, and we're gonna kind of like go through the filmography out of order, based on theme. And you folks, if you're interested, like we should do a collab. You should come on to my show.
A
Oh, yeah.
collab.
We
Yeah,
love
collab,
collabs.
little crossover. But yeah, that's where you can find me. John Who podcast, Asians Represent podcast, and of course Daniel H. Kwan on Blue Sky and other social media platforms.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you all for listening to this episode of Spooky Asian Club. Don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe, and share this with someone who's a zombie or a samurai or an immortal being that gets resurrected into another lifetime.
And until next time, remember that there could be 666 portals to the other side, but only one of them will open a portal to infinite power.
See you guys later.
Bye.
This episode of Spooky Asian Club was edited by Marcus Mays. Music was provided by Artlist. Spooky Asian Club's logo was designed by Andy Crisp, and the sustained life of this podcast is made possible from our creepy little Patreon members and listeners like you.